good morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket is the upcoming US presidential elections between President Joseph Biden and former President Donald J. Trump. But today's subject has to do with last 2 weeks CNN presidential debates that took place in Atlanta, Georgia, where President Joe Biden's performance also was called into question by various news outlets and prominent Democrats about him still staying in this year's presidential elections. But fellows, before I dive into this subject today, let's first extend our condolences to the family of Corey, Pennsylvania's firefighter who was killed by Thomas Matthew Crooks of Bethel, Pennsylvania, in an assassination attempt on former President Donald J. Trump at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania last week. We also extend our well wishes to all those that were injured in that incident and wish them speedy recovery. It is very unfortunate to have a 20-year-old go to a rally with a gun and shoot and try to assassinate former President Donald J. Trump. But fellows, so now let's dive straight into the subject today. And this subject has to do with everything about President Joseph Biden's appearance at last 2 weeks CNN presidential debates, where he found it even very difficult to put sentences together. And it was out of that performance also that led to all this outcry coming from various news outlets, including prominent Democrats, congressmen, senators, and even George Clooney penning an op-ed calling on President Biden to step aside and withdraw from this year's presidential elections coming up in November. But President Biden also had a follow-up interview with George Stephanopoulos of ABC, where he stood firm and dug in that he ain't going nowhere, because he strongly believes that he is the only one who can beat Donald Trump coming November. And I can understand where President Biden is coming from, because taking into consideration the fact that all these congressmen and these prominent Democrats went out publicly, more or less humiliating him, calling him out to withdraw from this year's presidential election. Whereas they could have done it in a more respectful and honorable way, which could have been Democrats coming together, led by former President Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, as well as some prominent leaders and donors of the party, going to President Biden and sharing their concerns with regards to his aging and health conditions. For President Biden to make that decision on his own, rather than being perceived like he's being forced out by the Democratic elites and members of the Democratic Party. That was the mistake the Democrats did in the first place. They should have done this privately, instead of these congressmen and some of these prominent donors all going out publicly, calling on him to withdraw and step aside and so on and so forth. And it's out of that also that President Biden, a man of pride, has decided he ain't going nowhere. But unfortunately for President Biden also, the growing drumbeat from these prominent Democrats and the public is getting louder and louder and louder by the minute, by the hour, by the day. And just last week, Adam Schiff, Congressman Adam Schiff, who is running for the Senate in California, a very close ally of Nancy Pelosi, also calling on President Biden to withdraw from this year's race. So basically right now, he's been put in a catch-22 scenario. Damn if he doesn't, damn if he doesn't. Because currently right now, it looks very humiliating for President Biden to step aside. Because even if he does it doesn't look like he did it out of his own will or honorably. It looks more like he was forced out by the very party that he has been leading for the past 3.5 years. So I can understand why he's dagging. And that rests solely on the Democrats' own mistake that they made, instead of trying to convince him to understand the importance of these upcoming elections. Because at the end of the day, they're looking at last week's Republican convention that took place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And if you're a Democrat watching that convention, where Donald Trump, the insurrector, now is the resurrector of the party, you have to be worried. I mean, Donald Trump picking up his vice president, J.D. Vance, a middle-class, working-class dude coming from Ohio, Appalachia. I mean, you talk about the Reagan Democrats, Rust Belt State, them selling this idea of this middle class building America, going against NAFTA, and making America great again. And if you're a Democrat watching this debate, I mean, watching this convention that took place last week, and especially looking at even what has transpired with regards to the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, I mean, fellows, I can understand why the Democrats are panicking, and they have to. Because the optics of what took place in the assassination attempt alone has given Donald Trump about 70% chance of winning this November. I mean, I had Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, in an interview talking about the badass Trump optic, fist pump, calling on fight, fight, fight. And he was talking about it. I mean, this is Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, he said he's not endorsing anybody, but him talking about that badass act and the optic of Donald Trump with his fist in the air, talking fight, 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 fight. I mean, fellows, that optic alone will give Donald Trump some votes. I'm telling you, fellows. Look, Americans believe in fighters. It doesn't matter what you think of Donald Trump. He has exhibited that fighting spirit that Americans tend to love. America is a totally different country. America is not like the rest of the world. I understand people who say, oh, he's a convicted felon, he's this and he's that, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, they also believe in strong leadership. And Donald Trump has exhibited that and exhibited that. That is why Mark Zuckerberg, I mean, I consider Mark Zuckerberg a liberal. I mean, him calling that optic has a very good optic for Donald Trump. That tells you exactly how most people see that fighting spirit of Donald Trump. You may disagree with me. You may not like Donald Trump. But there's nobody also who can say that Donald Trump doesn't have that fighting spirit and doesn't stand firm and strong and love America. You can't say that about Donald Trump. You can not like Donald Trump for whatever reason. But at the end of the day, there's one thing about Donald Trump that most Americans will agree, that he's a fighter and he really loves America. And he fights regardless of how you perceive his decisions making or what his agenda is, believes that he fights for American citizens. That is what we all can agree on about Donald Trump. And last week's optic also proved that. I mean, look at the convention that they had at Milwaukee. Look at the message that they sent to the American citizens last week. I mean, we talk about blue collar pick that he made in J.D. Vance. Talking about growing up in the Rust Belt state of Ohio. I mean, when NAFTA became the issue, that also led to destroying all these manufacturing jobs that most of these blue collar people used to have in these Rust Belt states of Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and all these places. I mean, fellows, so now looking at all of this, that the Republicans have been able to put up to showcase the coming of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, they have the Democrats in a very, very, very tough spot right now. I bet you, fellows, this Republican convention last week, I don't care what anybody says, have the Democrats in a very, very bad spot. I mean, they have to counter this. And they have to counter this. I mean, Joe Biden, if was very healthy, like the good old Joe, would have been a perfect candidate for this year's election. But unfortunately, because of his health conditions and all that stuff that everybody saw during the debate, and with all this drumbeat getting louder and louder and louder from these Democrats calling on him to withdraw, I don't know if Joe Biden is going to withdraw. But now the question is, if Joe Biden withdraws, what would be the best option for the Democrats to win this coming November? I already know Kamala Harris' P team already talking about her, going to pick a white dude as a vice president, and because she's part of the Joe Biden team already, all that money that has already been donated to the campaign, she can use that money, and she has a better chance of beating Donald Trump than the rest of these governors that people are also talking about. But I beg to differ on that notion. I really beg to differ on that notion. Because you've heard all this talk about how Kamala Harris would be the perfect fit. But I beg to differ. As much as I like Kamala Harris, smart woman, intelligent woman, and she's good enough to represent this country at any given time. But at the end of the day, fellows, let's be realistic. Let's be pragmatic on this particular issue. And I'm a pragmatist. As much as I like Kamala Harris, and I would love her to become the president if she can become the president, let's also look at the reality of it. Let's look at the optics, like I just said, about the RNC convention that took place last week, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Fellows, look, this tells us clearly now that for the Democrats to win in November, they can never pick Kamala Harris or a woman, period. This is my opinion, which I strongly stand by. There is no way Kamala Harris or any woman can beat Donald Trump coming November. The best chance for Democrats to win this White House coming November will have to be a white male, period. Looking at what is going on right now, even Joe Biden, in the current poll, looking at the 3 critical states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. According to the current poll right now, Joe Biden is leading Donald Trump in these 2 states, Wisconsin and Michigan, very thin margins. But somehow Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden in Pennsylvania by about 7 percentage points, which is outside the margin of error. And we're talking about Joe Biden, a son of Scranton, Pennsylvania. That's who we are talking about. He is down by 7 percentage points to Donald Trump in Scranton. A son of Scranton, Pennsylvania. A son of Pennsylvania, born and bred in Pennsylvania. He is down by 7 percentage points to Donald Trump. So looking at all of that, that tells you something clearly. That look, if the Democrats want to win this November, they cannot pick a woman, period. Because Donald Trump have already beaten Hillary Clinton. Okay, fellas, let's be real here. Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in 2016. And he beat her in all these 3 key critical states. Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And talking about Pennsylvania, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton's husband, won all these 3 states twice. So how come that Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in all these 3 states? But somehow, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump 4 years ago in all these 3 states. That tells you something clearly about these 3 states. These 3 Rust Belt states, old industrial states, with white working class men, are not going to vote for a woman, period. And I said it. Let's call a spade a spade. They didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, and they ain't going to vote for Kamala Harris. Are you kidding me, fellas? Let's be real here. If Hillary Clinton, former President Bill Clinton's wife, couldn't beat Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, how in the world do we think that a black woman from California, Kamala Harris, is somehow going to beat Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Are you kidding me? It ain't happening, fellas. Let's be real about it. Let's be real. I mean, we have Joe Biden now trailing 7 percentage points to Donald Trump. And then somehow we think that if you nominate Kamala Harris, she's going to overcome that 7 percentage point and beat Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, in Michigan and Wisconsin. It ain't happening. There's no way Kamala Harris can beat Donald Trump. As much as I like Kamala Harris, but I'm being realist. I'm being a pragmatist. That's the reality. And if Democrats want to beat Donald Trump this coming November, then fellas, the only way the Democrats can beat Donald Trump coming this November is by nominating one of these three white men. Either the governor of Pennsylvania, current governor, Josh Shapiro, governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper. These three white men have a better shot of defeating Donald Trump in November. And I strongly believe that any of these three white men will beat Donald Trump coming November. Because fellas, look, this election coming up is not about the economy. It's not about the economy. Because if this election were to be about the economy, there's no way Donald Trump would even be close to Joe Biden. Because the economy have been doing pretty well, considering the coming out of the COVID and inflation, and now looking at inflation at 2.5%, and looking at the unemployment rate at around 3-point-something%. I mean, come on. America's economy is the best economy in the world, period. There's no country on this planet Earth that has a better economy than the United States of America. So how come that Donald Trump is still close to Joe Biden and leading Joe Biden in some key states? It has to do with the way the Republican Party have been able to sell this election. The Republican Party have made this election about immigration, taxes. These are the two key issues that the Republican Party have made this election about. That is why they have been pounding on Kamala Harris ever since when Joe Biden assigned the immigration issue at the southern border to Kamala Harris to take care of it. And out of that fiasco that happened on the border, the southern border, the Republican Party has been pounding and pounding and pounding Kamala Harris on it. So the Republican Party have made immigration as the main factor in this election. And this election this year is about immigration. It's all about immigration. It has nothing to do with anything about immigration. That is why Donald Trump, in his acceptance speech, reiterated that he's going to have to deport a lot of people. It's all about immigration. Fellas, don't buy into this notion that somehow, when they do the polls, Kamala Harris is doing better because she's the one that right now it seems like she can beat Donald Trump. And somehow these sitting governors have not been vetted. I mean, come on, fellas. Come on, fellas. Kamala Harris will do well in the polls right now because she's a no-name. She's the sitting vice president. And a lot of times, when you pull these people, a lot of them will say, oh, she's a black woman. We don't have a problem voting for her. But fellas, let's not forget. Let's not forget about the past history of how white folks who have been pulled. Talking about Tom Bradley of LA, when he was running for the California governorship, as well as Doc Wilder. When they pull these white folks, and they will say, oh, they are voting for Bradley, they are voting for Wilder. In the end, Bradley lost. But Wilder's margins were so small that they have to go back and do a recount in Virginia. So a lot of times you have this scenario where it will show right now that people will say, oh, we don't have a problem with voting for a black man or that stuff. But fellas, let's be clear about it. Like I stated earlier, Hillary Clinton couldn't beat Donald Trump in these three key states. Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And the Democrats cannot win this presidential election coming November without winning these three states. I'm sorry, fellas. That's the map. President Biden's campaign already even said it themselves. And we all know that But if you can convince me that putting Kamala Harris there, the Democrats can beat Donald Trump, then I'm all for it. But it's not going to happen. It ain't happening. If Joe Biden, son of Scranton, son of Pennsylvania, is trailing Trump right now in Pennsylvania, how in the world do you think that black woman from California is going to overcome that and beat Donald Trump in Pennsylvania? It ain't happening, fellas. She might win in Georgia. But talking about Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, the best way for the Democrats to win this election is to choose one of these three white governors. Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Andy Beshear of Kentucky, or Roy Cooper of North Carolina. These are the best chances for the Democrats to win this November. And there's no ifs and buts about it. Other than that, they are never going to beat Donald Trump with a woman. I'm sorry, it ain't happening. It's never going to happen. And we talk about these Rust Belt states. These are what we call the old Reagan Democrats. You know, these Reagan white-collar, old white men and young men now, in most of these Rust Belts, they talk about Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana. All these old Reagan Democrats, they switch, they go back and forth. They voted for Clinton twice. Didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, voted for Biden. All right? So all these Reagan Democrats who have been going back and forth, they ain't going to vote for no black woman coming from California. Let's be real about this, fellas. I'm sorry, let's be real. I'm being a pragmatist on this. So to me, if the Democrats want to win this coming November, there's no better shot than choosing one of these three white governors, period. Because right now, this election is going to be about taxes as well. And Donald Trump already talking about keeping the taxes that he passed when he was in office. I never heard Joe Biden talk about going back to Obama taxes era, because taxes is a winning issue. And the Republicans know that. So they are using taxes and immigration. See, I don't have a beef in this election. I mean, if Donald Trump wins, I know one thing for sure. He's going to cut taxes and he's going to keep regulation in check, which is a good thing. And that's one area I agree with Donald Trump. So I don't have a beef. But in my own preference, I prefer Biden, Democrats to win. But if Donald Trump should win also, I'm okay with that. But fellas, this coming election is about three key states: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And it's only a white male that can defeat Donald Trump coming November. So fellas, if it's Sunday, it's the Africa Weekly Talk. God bless you guys and have a great week.